Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I'm your host, Ainsley Brown. In today's episode, we're going to talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart, and that's about food, particularly food security and using zones to improve food security. Now, I just want to show you a mango here, pomegranate, and two lovely, massive guavas, which I picked from my backyard. And they just seeing them actually inspired me to think about doing this episode and trying to bring a different perspective as to using zones, which is really a policy instrument of governments in terms of focusing it on food security. And this is particularly topical now because of inflation, food inflation, that has racked the world, particularly due to the COVID-19 induced supply chain issues that or bottlenecks that have occurred, and as well as the Russia or Ukraine Russia war that has particularly deteriorated um, wheat prices or grain prices and certain edible oils because both of those countries are big in terms of export producers and exporters of some of these materials that are used worldwide. Now, zones definitely can play a role in food security in many respects. One, from the production side, in terms of just growing, you could have a zone that's an agricultural zone where farmers grow. They're given, property, or they're given even the incentives, fiscal incentives, X amount on corporate income tax or duty-free imports on fertilizer and certain sprays that they would need, and herbicides, and all the different things that they would need, or even within the domestic territory, if they need services such as veterinarian services, they can tap into that and get certain discounts. Maybe they get the VAT, the value added tax off of those things. Again, a government can structure it how they want to structure it. The point is they can, and zones represent an instrument in which they can do this. That's one. Two, I would say that they could also do on the production side. That is to say that they can um, incentivize agro-processing, whether it is the freezing, the canning, the processing of fruits and vegetables and different types of food, the milling of grain into flour and things like that. A third one is research and development. um, the agri-tech industry, not just the agriculture or agro-processing or food industry, but the agri-tech in terms of, ranging from drones to the different types of chemicals to even the services whereby you can tap into GPS services where you can look at the topography of your land and see how it slopes and, how much water to put in certain areas and, the soil conditions and all kinds of wonderful types of information can be gained to have more precision farming, less chemicals being used, less fertilizer being used, and more precise, reducing carbon footprints and harmful chemicals going into the environment and so forth, and also cutting costs for farmers. So these things are possible in terms of research and development side of things. A fourth one could be outsourcing, which is kind of a unification of the other three, whereby a government could, and there's some controversy around this because we've seen where um, large tracts of land in certain countries have been bought up by either other governments or other or corporations, and they have massive farms which actually don't add to the food security of the country because the food is grown and then sent out of the country. So they would have to ensure that if you're going to do that, one way to ensure the food security is, one, have joint ventures with your people, also have off-taker agreements, side agreements whereby you could um, with the investor that comes, you could say, have a triggering event if a disaster happens, a hurricane or, typhoon or earthquake or something like that. You then get to buy these supplies. So in many ways, they act as a strategic reserve for you. Um, and it can be done either from the production within the country, or it also could be done where it's for a commodity that you do not produce. So, for example, you may not grow wheat, and have flour, wheat flour, but you could have your country being a strategic depot for the storage, which is near to some major economy that needs wheat or produces wheat and is going to export, and you're just, that way station, but you have that side agreement, and you know that you have X amount of or the potential to tap into X amount of wheat or X amount of flour given a certain circumstance. And you could even negotiate prices to say, it's at a certain level. Again, we just have to be creative. So it can add to the food security of the country. So it's about producing more, but also securing supply, right? Securing supply and also securing the inputs into production. That is, whether it be from the fertilizer to the seeds, to the eggs, the embryos, whatever it is, we need to secure the supply. And zones can be used either to ground production within the country or be a postponement station. That is, things are sent there to go out, but because they're there, you have the potential to access it straight up from a market perspective, but also governments could enter into certain arrangements. It sounds a bit counterintuitive and sounds a bit, even counter to market economics, but it actually fits in because in a different context, there are countries like Switzerland, for example, that have entered agreements with its vendors, with its suppliers, with its traders that if certain events happen, their stock functions as an emergency reserve for the country. And the government doesn't just impose it on these traders, these business people. There's an understanding there within the legal framework, and I believe, but I'd have to check exactly. I think they're compensated for participation, but also they are compensated. The government doesn't just seize their goods, so that there is compensation. So there's not expropriation without compensation, or even a matter of expropriation at all. There is just that understanding. So these things could happen within the zones in terms of looking at improved food security. So if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe. If you want to see me do a particular topic in relation to zones and how zones can relate to other subject matters, just leave me a comment down below and I'll get right back to you.